the good, the bad, and everything in between. Steve Forbes with me to say we're missing that. Now, Steve, this is maybe an extreme case, I grant you, and we're probably giving Newsweek a lot of publicity. But I think this is kind of endemic of what we've been seeing in the media in general. What do you make of it?
Yeah, and you also have to mention his Supreme Court appointment, Gorsuch, one of the finest people to go on that court.
Exactly.
Got it through the Senate. That's generational. That's going to be decades to come, that good thing.
But they see it through the prism, and they mention of legislation and having a tough time there. He certainly wouldn't be the first president there. And I'm not saying that he contributes to a lot of problems, but come on.
Well, that's why the real lazy boy award should go to the Republicans in Congress, having botched it on health care, not putting tax cuts first, not even having a tax cut proposal on the table, even though they've been working on it for years. So if you want laziness, go to Capitol Hill.
You know what's a little bit galling about this, too? And then they dismiss the market run up under him, and the improvement in jobs. But man, oh man, if it were the other way, if we were tanking in the markets, or we were losing a lot of jobs, they'd be all over.
Well, by the way, lazy, when some people call Barack Obama that when he's on the golf course a lot, that was racist. Can't do that. So there is a double standard. And by the way, on Warren Harding, he actually had a successful presidency. Got the U.S. out of a depression, started the booming 20s, tax cutter. So maybe he didn't have a high IQ, according to the Democrats.
But here's where it gets going. And it's an opinion piece.
Ignorance.
I kept looking very closely at the piece, whether, this is really an opinion piece, and I'll see that there. No, it's treated as a news story, a cover story at that. But here's one thing that really stuck in my craw. If you are one of the millions of Americans counting the days until Trump is no longer president, wonder where they're coming from. His failures may seem like victories, except he is your president. Nobody wants to live in a nation in decline, a superpower devolving into a laughingstock. Well, with $4 trillion in added market value, global capital drawn here, 1 million jobs in 6 months, that hardly strikes me as a laughingstock or a nation in decline. That's not right.
And you've got a troubled world out there, and you're going to see in the next few months. We have China and India getting over.
And that troubled world is attracted to our part of the world to invest its money.
Yes. And where did that troubled world really get a boost? Under Barack Obama. He's the one who let Putin do what he did.
By the way, I'm not going to cast aspersions on any party or side here. We have talked about the fact, I thought when going after Jeff Sessions, I thought the president was not right to do that. What does he care what I say? What anyone care what I say? But we've gotten into these issues, just like we've gotten into, this, as yesterday, devoting the entire show to it, to the escalation and this, impounding a grand jury to look into the whole Russia thing. That's not so unusual. It happens in a lot of investigations. I'm just wondering, does the media just have it out for him? And it's one thing to cite bad stuff all the time, but not even to acknowledge good stuff that you can't ignore some of the stuff I cited.
No, and it's no secret. The media, sadly, the mainstream media is throwing caution to the winds, making no pretense, feeling this guy's the worst thing since I don't know what, white bread or whatever, and they're going to do everything they can to undermine the presidency. They'll give him credit for nothing. And that's why the Bernie Sanders wing of the Democratic Party is going to make sure there's going to be no real cooperation with the Republicans on anything until they suffer another electoral setback.
But you're a great historian besides, and I remember we take snapshots in the moment and assume, and you and I are old enough to remember the early read on Ronald Reagan, especially with the '82 recession, that he was a one-termer going nowhere fast. There were a great many doubts about Bill Clinton after a rocky 6 months between health care and gays in the military, that he was looking like a disaster. My point is that you would think by then the media would have discovered we can't prejudge, but we certainly can't be calling, the President of the United States Al Bundy. Where do we get off doing that?
Well, again, they're going to do everything they can to undermine him. Nothing is out of bounds. Even the New York Times is now using 4-letter words, which they never did before. And they were going to do everything they can to get this guy out. And
when you look at a presidency, whether it's Barack Obama or these others, you look at them through a variety of not only legislative achievements, but markets, employment, jobs. I mean, there are a host of, criteria I use to they're not grades on a president, but things you check off during his presidency.
Well, number one, defense. That's the first thing government do, defend the realm. Number two, prosperous economy, not only good for us, but for the rest of the world. Ronald Reagan demonstrated that. And the thing they overlook is that every presidency goes through what you might call a shakedown cruise. Trump has had a painful one, but they go through it. John Kennedy had the Bay of Pigs.
Absolutely.
Disaster.
Absolutely.
And so sadly, they don't come in well-formed.
You know what's interesting, where they tipped themselves in this piece by saying, I want to get your reaction to this. For the love of Lincoln, someone tell him, referring to Donald Trump, forget tax cuts and Muslim bans. He should be out there paving I-95 and slapping fresh paint on the Chesapeake Bay Bridge. Now, the bias there was that they were for infrastructure spending and all. That's fine. But to say that the other things were just a waste of time shows an immediate bias and a dismissal of what are legitimate points.
Well, where do you get the resources to repaint buildings? Where do you get the resources to repave highways and build new bridges? You get it from a prosperous economy. That's why this tax cut is going to be absolutely critical. If he gets a good tax bill through by the end of the year, makes it retroactive.
Fair enough.
Vibrant economies, we know, cover a multitude of sins, and people feel good when things are going up. So you just ride this stuff through.
All right, Steve Forbes, thank you very much.
you.
I'm telling you, folks, I saw this, and a lot of people said, yeah, Neil, you're just selling a bunch of Newsweeks. And Lazy Boys. Now, the Lazy Boy thing I don't have a problem with. They're very comfortable. Fast food, potato chips while you're sitting in a chair, fine by me. My only point, folks, is just to say, when you see this kind of stuff, and many in the media are claiming they're very, very fair about presenting him, that's not right. Take it from someone who tries to look at the big picture here, and it's 3 hours a day to do just that, at a network that has 24 hours a day to do that, rival networks that have the same, business networks that have the same. Get into everything. But reducing the president to a cartoon figure because you simply don't like the guy, that is wrong. That is insulting. This cover is a sin. More to this.